When you go to an event, you might think that the entertainment is there, it's just one phone call and everything is happening. Of course, absolutely not. And today, I am delighted to speak with an icon in our industry, somebody who's been in entertainment all his life and still is, the one and only Michael Owen. Enjoy my conversation with Michael Owen from EventGenuity. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I have an icon from our industry. The guy who, according to his own words, doesn't remember the 70s because he was doing product testing. It's the only person that knows all the artists in the world. And more than that, will always advise with a lot of honesty his clients on who should they bring or not. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend, the Michael Owen. Michael, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. As I've said, since James Brown passed, I'm the hardest working man in show business. So, although I'm not 100% sure he's not going to get up out of the casket and do one more encore with the cape. So,
yeah,
but very good. It's good to be with you, Eric.
It's always good to be with you after all these years together, volunteering together with MPI and having a great cigar at every conference. But before we get into your business and your journey, there's an anecdote I would love you to share with the audience. What happened when you had to speak to the officer at custom in the UK with your name?
Well, it wasn't the officer. Who it was the desk person for the airlines.
Okay.
And I was coming back from Frankfurt, as a matter of fact. And I was in the airport, sitting where the rest of us peasants sit. And there was an Indian man made the announcement. He said, "Would Michael Owen please step to the counter? Michael Owen, please step to the counter." So I thought, sure, what's this going to be? And as I was walking up, he's looking both ways. He's going, "Michael Owen, please step to the counter." And I said, "Hi, I'm Michael Owen." He went, No, not Michael Owen. For those of you in North America who don't know, Michael Owen I think he's an executive or a broadcaster now, but he was a very, very big time soccer player, football player for my European friends. Yeah. And so I get confused all the time. Although after numerous attempts at popping into his checking account, I've had no luck whatsoever. So it's just an odd coincidence, though.
Michael, you are like me, like many people. You join our industry without even knowing there was such an industry and almost fell into it. But how did that happen to you?
Well, 1996 in Nashville, there was something called a WEC, a WEC, World Education Congress, that was coming to Nashville. We saw printed in the paper that there were something like 2,500 or 3,000 meeting planners coming to Nashville. And we thought, okay, we ought to get out there and try to capture some of these folks. So we reached out, we were able to work with MPI, and we provided, I don't remember if it was a general session or the closing. I believe it was Martina McBride, if I'm not mistaken. And we did that in exchange. At that time, the organization was having trade shows. So we swapped out the booth, right, to exhibit at the trade show, then realizing that of the 2,500 who were there were maybe 1,000 planners. Out of the 1,000 planners, there may be 6 that could need us, so we learned a lot. Then the next month, locally, I didn't know they had chapters. We didn't know anything about it. We just joined and figured we'd go in there and, throw our card in the ring and just get all kinds of business. Doesn't work that way. Learn it does. It's an investment. So the next month was something called a committee sign up. It was in Nashville at a barbecue joint on their deck. It was beautiful, lovely, one thing and another. The way I recall it is I raised my hand to get another beer, and the president patted me on the back and said, "Thank you for taking the newsletter. We'll see you next month." Well, I didn't think any more about it, but the next month I got a call and they said, "Are you ever going to come to a board meeting?" I said, "What's a board meeting?" I had no idea. And that was literally my beginning into the industry. And to understand, because we had spent years joining this organization and that organization. I had two different partners then. And the methodology we used was sign up, get the membership list, and then wait for the phone to ring.
Oh, that's very efficient.
In a certain way, yes. And what I learned is that it takes an investment. By accidentally stumbling into volunteer leadership, I found a place where I could contribute, where I could learn, and most of all, where I could connect with people that wouldn't have the time of day with me if I cold called them.
Absolutely. Contributing, learning, and connecting.
And
That's really the essence of volunteering.
And the true value of getting to know someone like that is that you have nothing at risk. You're not trying to sell them something. They get to know you. They get to know what you're made of, how you operate. They get to know a number of things. And then eventually, if they have a need, they think of you first. And I'm still working. I've got clients now that I've had one, but this will be my 25th year in September.
Wow.
Got another that's 19. I got another that's 17. And we welcome the new ones. But I love those that we've stood by each other. And it's not always been easy. I mean, it's not necessarily that we haven't had crises we had to deal with. But if you're doing things right and you stand behind your work, there's nothing like a good crisis to make a good client.
No, that's true. Absolutely true. And you know everyone in entertainment, but you were in a band in another life.
Well, that's how I got into it. I had played in high school garage bands. This is when the Beatles came out. And the sad part about doing this is I'm afraid people are going to know how old I am.
You don't look 120, let me tell you.
Somebody said something about Teddy Roosevelt, and I said, I think he was a class behind me. So, but I started out in middle school playing trombone. I went to a technical and vocational high school and realized that trombone players didn't meet girls. So my mom, we went down, hopped on a bus, and went to downtown Nashville, actually right where the entertainment district is now. But at that time, it was pawn shops, peep shows. It was just a pretty ratty part of town.
Wow.
So we went to a pawn shop, and I traded my trombone for an off-brand bass guitar. The only reason I had no idea how to play it, the only reason I went to a bass guitar because it was in the same clef as a trombone, bass clef. But I never learned how to read. It was all about ear. Everything was by ear. And at first, I didn't even have an amp. I'd have to hold my bass up under my chin so I could feel the notes. But I learned how to play at a time. I grew up in Nashville hating country music.
Really?
Hating country music.
Oh, wow.
That's no longer the case. But every Saturday afternoon, you had the lineup. You had Porter Wagoner and Flatt and Scruggs, and it was country. And it said, oh, these guys, just terrible. At night in Nashville, back then, there were not a lot of Black artists on contemporary radio, AM radio. But there was one radio station still in existence in Nashville called WLAC that at night, they'd go from talk to playing R&B. They were playing Sam and Dave and Otis Redding and Carla Thomas and Jimmy Reed and just really deep. And that's what, now bear in mind, this is after the Beatles and this is the beginning of the European invasion with Zeppelin and Stones and everybody else. Well, we were listening, we loved that stuff, but we were listening to the R&B folks. And so a couple years later, started playing. I was an agent at 19. A guy he was also a record promoter. We promoted records for Motown and Buddha. Buddha was the record company that did all the bubblegum music back in the late 60s, early 70s. And I had a club that needed a band. I had two musicians who didn't have a bass player or a drummer. So we went in there, we worked Corral Club, Nashville, Dickerson Road. We worked 7 nights a week, 5 sets a night for $540 a week for the entire band. Honest to God truth. We didn't know the difference because the beer maids were gorgeous. Back then, you couldn't buy liquor by the drink in Nashville, so they had beer maids, and we'd get paid in wet dollar bills, wet from the beer. At the end of the night, we'd get paid in that. And we were in heaven because we got to play music. My intent was to do it temporarily. We wound up doing that. I had that band. We moved that band to New England, eventually moved to Providence because it's in the center of everything. We played Boston, the ski areas, the Cape, and all of that. We once played Provincetown. Provincetown's beautiful, beautiful place. It's a very gay place. I mean, it lands in and the lovely people out there and everything. We were the only 4 straight guys on the beach. We were kind of bummed for a while until we realized that Canadian girls vacationed in Provincetown. And so our average that we thought was going to be nil kind of went up in a hurry. But I got started.
That's how you improve French. Very good.
Right. I got started in that. I had, when the band broke up, the agent that we were working with said, I really wish you would come in the office. They got me started. A few years later, I decided to move back to Nashville, and that's how I got started. And most of what I did back then was booking nightclubs. Over the years, I've done clubs. I've done one-nighters, not many weddings. I'm not a fan of brides, mothers, and mothers-in-law. No offense, ladies. But played, booked cruise lines. I have a cruise line story that I'm told I'm forbidden for telling here, but for those of you who are listening, if you'll buy me a cocktail, I'll tell you anything.
Oh, you should definitely buy him a cocktail. Trust me.
And then, the epiphany was a few years later, I had a friend that was he became a friend. He was a VP of client experience at one of the cruise lines. And I don't haunt my friends or anybody. I don't bug anybody. I want to let people know what I do and that I have certain expertise, and just keep me in mind if you need me. And we were having cocktails one evening and we got to be good friends. And I said, I'm doing a fair amount of business with you, but it's high school and college cruises, and it lasts about 2 weeks every spring or every summer. And his response was, all right, well, let me ask you a question. I said, I think we could do more business, but I don't want to bug you. He said, let me explain it to you. He said, so how many groups have you got on your roster that I've seen? I said, well, total on the roster is probably, I don't know, 18 or 20. I'd have to go count. And he said, so I've seen 3/4 of them, let's say, right? And he said, every one of them was exactly what you told me they would be, as good as it gets in what they do, each of them a little bit different. He said, and that's great, but let me tell you what I need from somebody like you. He said, I got entertainment problems. I need you to solve my problems rather than bring me a shelf full of people that you already have that we can still continue to use because they've all done well. But let me tell you some of the things that are going on in my world. And it was like a bulb going on of, wait a minute, represent a client in a world that can be mysterious and at one point, maybe still a little bit, is full of scallywags and scoundrels, and leverage that experience to help the client reach their goals, keep them out of trouble with somebody that doesn't work. What are you trying to say? What other things do you have going on? No, you don't need to spend 50,000. We can get it done for 10 with this, that, and the other. And I began to push, because bear in mind that this was the time, this was the 90s, the 1900s. At that time, I was refocusing on corporate entertainment, beginning to understand more because of what we talked about earlier. And I went to my partners and I said, I think it doesn't matter what our roster is. I mean, it doesn't matter. It just matters what connections we have and who we can connect people to, keep them out of trouble. And they didn't agree, and they ran up until recently a very, very successful traditional model. I left the company, started our company in 98, so 26 years now. And it was all based on working with taking the client needs, discussing what their objectives were, what their theming was, what their audience was, and trying to match their goals and objectives to the right acts. And the weird thing about entertainment at corporate events, we still don't pay that much attention to it as an industry. It's just sort of an afterthought. Well, we've got everything else, so we got to get this act. And you'll get a CEO who says, I want such and such an act. They're not picked with any strategy involved. Right. They're not. And, you say strategy and entertainment, it sounds like an oxymoron. And me being just a moron is sort of.
No, but Michael, what you say, obviously, and we know each other, that's what I've been preaching, but not only for entertainment. Start with the needs of your customer, understand the strategy, understand their market, understand what is their competition, and understand what they're trying to achieve with the specific face to face. And then you come with the logistical question, and then you come with the execution. But to your point, if you the CEO wants to have XYZ band, or the CEO wants to go and play golf because he or she likes golf, but the majority of the employees or the customer are not fans of golf, you're missing the mark. You're spending money for nothing.
Well, it goes back to some of the conversations we've had about saying, what are you trying to say? Who are you, and what is this about? And it's frustrating to me to see the expenditure, particularly now. I have no pride, and I'll find you whatever you need. I mean, a monkey and a banjo, one-legged tap dancer. I mean, what? I have a deep Rolodex full of stuff to get just about anybody, but I do a fair amount of national acts. And these days, a decent, a good, a solid corporate non-national acts are expensive. So if you're going to invest that money, you ought to think a little bit about why you're doing it, what you want to say. A national act, a celebrity act will bring a certain cachet to whatever it is you're doing. They'll bring it's like if you get the right one, but they're not the end all be all. And if you're going to make those kinds of investments, you have to understand why.
Yep. So with all the things you've seen in your life and all the stories, is there any anecdotes that you want to share with the audience that exemplify not only what you're doing, but how challenging it can be sometimes? And let's start with one. And I know it's when you were in the band and your instruments were stolen.
Oh, yeah. So we landed in Providence, Rhode Island, was the first place we played in New England. And Providence, which is a very different place now, it's a beautiful town. It's a very, very different place. But in 69 and 70, it was the headquarters of the New England Mafia, right? So we arrived in Providence. Of course, back then we didn't have GPS or anything else. So we pulled into a gas station to ask for directions and didn't understand a freaking word the guy said. He's like, oh, hey, oh. Anyways, we had played, the fellows that we worked for were actually mob or mob adjacent. So we played at their place in Providence. And after work in Providence, we'd go up by Brown University and have breakfast after the gig, or have a bite after the gig. And we're up there, and there were several Nashville groups. There were a lot of Nashville groups going back and forth to New England at the time. And there was a group, Ugly Forest, and I'll never forget, they were there. We were all in the Hungry Chic was the name of the restaurant. We were in the Hungry Chic. We came out. They went by their trailer, and the door was ajar. And they opened the trailer, and it's like, crap. They stole my guitars. They stole every guitar that was in there because everything else was too heavy to carry. So they grabbed so I called the bar owner. I said, Bobby, man, the guys got ripped off. They don't have any guitars. They're opening for you at Jason's tomorrow night. What should I tell them? He said, you take them down to Silvio DePippo and Sons, a music store on Atwells Avenue. He said, you tell Tommy DePippo that I said, give them anything that they want. I'll make sure they stand good for it. So Monday morning, we get up, we go over, we get them the guitars. They're really happy, but they're happy, not happy they lost their guitars, but happy to have them replaced. Next weekend, I saw them somewhere else. I said, hey, Average, go, you're not going to believe this. He said, we're in the middle of a set playing away, and in walks these guys with our guitars and said, we didn't know you were working for Mr. Rizzo. We apologize. Can we buy you a drink? So, and actually, I mean, it went on. The mob was very prevalent at that time. There were all kinds of stuff going on there in Boston. Of course, the New England mob, being out of Providence, ran Boston. And there were places that we would work that I said for 10 years, because part of the time I was playing and part of the time as an agent, for 10 years, we worked with mob guys. And I was never beat for a nickel, never lost a nickel, we always did what we said we were going to do and never had a problem. Now, I'm not saying they're good guys. I'm just saying that a very valuable lesson about standing by your word.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Any other anecdote with maybe recently with well-known bands and how it is easy or a nightmare to work with people that might be very well known from the public, but might actually be a problem for a corporate event?
Well, for the most part, an industry that as I said earlier, was full of scoundrels and scalawags, are it's now populated by business folks. When it comes to the acts, some of the older acts who were on the Chitlin circuit, they call it, still have to be paid in cash at the end. I mean, it's a thing because they used to get beat, and before they'd go on the stage, they want to get paid in cash. Aretha Franklin puts the cash, I mean, she has her guy count it, puts the cash in her purse. If you ever watch Aretha Franklin concert, she'll carry her purse on stage and sit it under the piano.
Huh.
And plus the fact, there are things that you need to know. Plus the fact, one of my all-time favorites is Aretha Franklin. I'm still a huge fan. She will not fly. She's long since passed, but she wouldn't fly. So if she couldn't make it on a bus, she was not coming. And then things like, I had Patti LaBelle one time in Dallas for a big charity ball. We were trying to put the event together, and I said, okay, here's what the cost is, whatever it was, 125,000 or whatever it was. And I said, let's do an airfare buyout. Well, we're very close with American Airlines. You know, they're headquartered here in Dallas, and we have some connections. You really don't want to do that. She said, why? I said, because we're shifting risk. I want them to have this travel problem. Even if it costs you a little bit more to do a buyout, trust me, it'll pay off in the long run. Well, we don't. Finally, they listened to me. We did a buyout. The gig was on a Saturday night in December. On Friday in December, she was playing in a casino in Atlantic City. There was a huge snowstorm. She had people stranded all over the place. And I think our buyout, may have been $15,000 for her entourage and everything. I bet they spent $30,000 changing, fixing, moving, finally got them in. But there's simple things that you don't understand. And one of the things that this is Patti LaBelle as well. They said, well, she wants black towels. The hotel has all the towels we could possibly need. They're white. I just don't understand why I have to get black towels. I said, in a word, lint. They all dress in black. They can't use them. I mean, they can use it, but they're going to look like hell. So those types of things. Pointer Sisters, there may be one left now, but the Pointer Sisters, even if they traveled together, when they arrived, they had to have separate limousines at the airport. At the hotel, we had to have at least one floor difference between their suites. And in one of the suites, we had to take out the minibar. And so trying to figure that out, I said, first off, I asked about the minibar. I said, oh, drinking? She said, no, it's food. She has a food thing, and we want to get all the temptations out, one thing and another. And the client's just going nuts. She said, well, we can do this, but it doesn't make any sense. They're just being divas. So let me put it to you this way. What if you were on the road working and living with your sister for 40 years? Oh, okay. All right. Now I got it, But it's it's an odd business. I've had a lot of good luck and a reputation, frankly, for being able to deal with historically difficult acts because I know it in advance and I know what their hot buttons are. I know how to speak their language, especially when it gets to, they don't even speak to the artist until they get there. So I'm speaking to their management. I'm speaking to their tour manager. And it's all about managing expectations, not only for the act, but for my client, and saying, let me explain to you why this is the way it is. There are things that are unexplainable, but if I can tell you why something like the Pointer Sisters, if I was on the road with my sister, I would choke her for 40 years, and I love her to death. So you have to kind of know what ticks the boxes. I have another thing I call my $150 worth of shrimp rule. And what I mean by that is that I'll tell, when I'm advancing a show with a tour manager and we're doing hospitality, it's like, look, are you going to drink this bottle of vodka? No. Well, let's take it off. It's not the cost, it's the principle. Okay, we're going to have this shrimp. So let me explain to you why I ask you these things. I'm talking to the tour manager now. It's because they would gladly pay you $150,000, gladly. And then if we had $150 worth of shrimp that you didn't touch, they would be deeply offended. If you'll use it, if it will make you comfortable, if it will make your lead performer or your band happy, we want them fat and happy and satisfied. we'll give it to you. But if you've got a list on here, because the thing about a celebrity rider is they have to fit a variety of situations. They have to fit the arena, they have to fit big clubs, they have to fit Vegas and everything else. Those things don't necessarily apply on what we call a one-off in our industry, because you're in one night, one thing and another. I'm not there to be cheap. I'm not there. It's not even necessarily to save money. It's to say, let's approach this in a way that says, these are the things that are important to us. This is what will make us happy and help us give you a good show. And then try to take some of that cost out of there that's really waste.
Yeah. No, and to your point, I'm always fascinating. First, how much organization, corporation can invest in having consulting firm coming in, developing a plan, and then when it comes to the execution of the plan, they're not even involved in the first kickoff or understanding who's going to be doing it. But the second thing, it's not but, it's really the same mindset for me. You invest a lot in an event, whether it's an association, a corporation, or whatever organization. And then when it comes to the entertainment, instead of looking at it as like it's going to be the last evening, is the last thing that people going to remember. Are they going to get, a very happy from dancing, from partying, for whatever? And then you said, well, I like this artist, then maybe the people that you are bringing don't like it. Or you're just going to go for the B solution just to save a little bit of money, where the rest of the organization and the rest of the event costs so much. I sometimes wonder what's going on in the mind of people making decision when it comes specifically now to entertainment, instead of just paying a little bit of premium and having something phenomenal, instead of having another evening that you will not remember.
Well, oddly enough, I have another story.
Uh-huh.
A few years ago, there was an organization who had a big closing night that they do. And they said, we're looking at doing a national act. Well, I had the opportunity at the time to do the Four Tops and the Temptations, or the Doobie Brothers were flying over that city to get to the start of their thing and could have gotten them. And they wound up getting a guy who's a great artist. Please don't mistake this. Chris Isaac, who had Foolish Games.
Yeah.
Excellent artist. But this is the closing night. And the most important thing to everybody on this closing night is, can I get a drink? Can I get a shrimp? And can I get to the dance floor to dance with all of my people I'm not going to see for another year?
Yep.
Right. Not that the act is not important. So they had Chris, and what he had was a row of maybe 5 or 6 deep of people who were big Chris Isaac fans. It was not his fault. He was placed in the wrong setting.
Yeah.
If they had put him on the general session stage and brought in Four Tops Temptations or something that's a party, it would have been a much better way to go. And I've seen that happen over and over. The thing that you have to do if you're thinking about entertainment for a corporate audience is understand that there's a very broad variety of tastes in that audience. And you got to leave your fandom at home. Doesn't matter if I'm a fan of the act. Doesn't matter if I absolutely love them. Doesn't matter if the planner absolutely loves them. It's how are we going to connect with the broadest section of our audience? And nobody's going to please everybody, so you have to give that up. But it's just interesting that there's not more thought that's put in it. And most people who do buy from fandom. Mostly even in the corporate, it's like, oh, I love this act. Okay, well, they had one hit. And, and I always say that I always recommend, think about a legacy act. Somebody's got a bunch of hits. Doesn't matter when those hits were, because the way things are now with movies, and my kids, I call them my nieces and nephews, they love classic rock and roll. They love Journey, all that stuff. Now they're also into modern music as well, but they know those acts and they're party acts. So you try to tell them, look, here's what works. And I've done this several times with acts. There are acts, the legacy acts that you can bring in that will do fabulous 45 to 60-minute show. But if you insist on having them do 75 minutes, now they're padding. and they're no longer, I can't tell you. And there's acts out there right now that have a ton of hits, but they've got 45 to 60 minutes worth of hits. They don't have 75. So they have B-side of the last album or something like that that doesn't mean anything and is not going to get a reaction. I had one very famous movie star, producer, director that I won't name. Again, that'll cost you a drink, who came in, who had a band, right? It was kind of a vanity project. He wasn't bad. Voice was thin, but his star power was through the roof. And I told him, I said, look, I said, they said, our shows are 90 minutes. I said, let's not do 90 minutes. Let's do 45 minutes and you'll leave with a whole bunch of fans because they're not here to hear your music. They're here for something else. And this was one of the big direct marketing companies where we had 15, 20,000, 90% of whom are women. And I said, you have such a big name and a big reputation and a big fan base. If you come in there and do 45 minutes, they will love every minute and they will go out front and buy all the CDs you could possibly bring. No, we want to do, well, sure enough, 40 minutes in, the crowd started to thin out, one thing and another. He said, well, why didn't you tell us? I said, here's the thing. And I can't do what you do. I told him, I'm standing on the stage during sound check. I said, I can't do what you do, but you can't do what I do. This is my arena. This is what I know. I'm trying to help you. And it's sometimes you just got to go, there ain't no help in this one. So bless their hearts.
Bless their heart. Yeah. If the good Lord's willing and the creek don't run. Michael, as usual, I'll spend hours listening to you, but the format of the podcast, it is what it is. But I'd like to ask you last question, because obviously you've seen many acts and you're going to see a lot of other acts as well. A lot of things have changed, but I'd like to ask you the question, what has not changed and what will not change when it comes to our industry and when it comes to corporate entertainment?
When it comes to corporate entertainment, I can tell you that, and I deal with the major national, international agencies, also the small ones. That the people that are in the corporate segment of the major agencies are educated, well-known, will give good advice if they trust you. And what they will tell you, I've done in the past, we do a session where I do a session with me as a producer, as an international, a representative of somebody, say Tim McGraw or whatever, and then a musician. And we talk about what it's like to come, what makes us comfortable. And these guys are in business to do business. And it's, if you can last as long as I have, you can build a reputation. They would much rather, sometimes it's hard to get to the right person in a big agency who may have 500, 600 agents to talk to. But if you're smart and you can dig hard enough, you can find a direct number. But I tell them it's kind of like this. It's sort of going to the doctor and say, I broke my arm, but it's okay. I read on YouTube how I could patch it up myself. You went to the doctor because the doctor knows what they're doing. You come to somebody like me, and there are other people like me who are very good, who do what I do, right? They may have a different method. They have different histories and that sort of thing. But you shouldn't be out there because there's so many gotchas in this business. And most of the gotchas are not in the contract. But to those of us who have studied, we were talking earlier about contracts and that sort of thing. You should know from that if it's not in the contract, it doesn't exist unless there's goodwill. And then sometimes they're not obligated to honor whatever it is you want.
And goodwill comes with relationship.
Goodwill comes with relationships. The other thing is understanding how to read a writer. You keep hearing stories about the green M&Ms. That's crap. They weren't green. It's a true story, but they were brown M&Ms. And it was Van Halen. And this is back in the days where most of the concerts happened in the big cities with big, production and arenas and stuff. When they started going out to Iowa and some of the smaller places to do these, they were worried that the producer was not reading the contract writer. So they put a thing in there, please, you must have the brown M&Ms removed. I actually know people who were with Sound 70 Productions in Nashville years ago, whose team pulled the brown M&Ms out. But here's the thing. It wasn't about the brown M&Ms. It was about making sure that they read the rider, every line in the rider.
And
that
people
was
will ask, but why the brown M&Ms? And then they knew that they had read the
They
contract.
knew that they had read the rider and they relaxed. Because see, everywhere you go, you got a different person putting up the stage, a different person putting the sound, the lights. And how did they know that they didn't understand that? So
that's brilliant. I love the story.
Oh, true story. But I can't hear every day. The other day, I said, somebody said the green M&Ms. I said, it ain't green, it's brown, and it's Van Halen, you know?
Michael, thank you so much for sharing your experience today and those stories. You founded EventGenuity, Michael Owen. How do people get in touch with you?
Well, some things haven't changed in 26 years. So my website, which also hadn't changed in 26 years, is EventGenuity.com. That's EventGenuity.com. My email is m.owen@eventgenuity.com, one word. And my phone number is the same as it's been for many years, 615-367-4505. Don't call me if the first thing in your pitch is that we're a nonprofit. That doesn't affect what we do on this side. No offense.
Got it.
But yeah, I mean, I'm good about giving advice. I mean, if somebody wants to do something, it's not all about booking. Yeah, of course, I'm still in business. I'm not going anywhere. I intend to work through lunch on the day of my funeral. So as long as I'm breathing, I'm going to be here. And if somebody has a question, I've done work on a variety of things, such as music licensing for live events. It's also about, it's one thing I learned, we talked about volunteering earlier, is that by sharing your expertise, again, it's that thing of getting to know that here's somebody who's not here to take every cent that you have. He will gladly take a big check if we can, put Bruce Springsteen on your show, but that's it mostly. And I think everybody I'm working with now, I met through someone else. So it's been very gratifying. That's the sound of me knocking wood over here on the corner. And long career, learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes. It's all in how you deal with it.
And I wish you many more mistakes and success in the future.
I don't need any help, Eric.
Thank you very much.
All right, buddy. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
Michael, thank you so much for sharing all those stories and for not sharing some of the other stories that people, yes, will have to buy a drink to you so that you can tell them privately. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to connect with me, please follow me on LinkedIn or go to eventbusinessformula.com. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with your network. Thank you. Bye-bye.